Let's welcome to the stage Prashant Kumar, the Regional President for IPG Mediabrands Asia, and Dean Dacko, Senior Vice President and Head of Marketing Products, Malaysia Airlines.
Hello. Can you hear me? Brand empathy in the social age. A very good afternoon to you all, late afternoon rather. It's midnight in Asia, so I'm sure, comparatively speaking, you are in good energy. I'm Prashant, President, IPG Mediabrands in Asia, and I'm going to talk about brand empathy in the social age, along with my friend here and the beloved client, Dean Dacko. We have designed the presentation session into two parts. In the first part, we'll talk about how 3 years back, when we started this journey of trying to reinvent Malaysia Airlines as a brand for the social age, what were the founding principles that we built it on, all right? And in the second part, we will talk about when the brand was faced with some impossible crisis, the most excruciating ones that you can imagine. How did this model stand the test of those crises? How did it behave, and where did it land us? All right? So let's start with the first part, the founding principles of building a brand in the social age, how we went about this journey. Right. They taught us in Marketing 101 that brands live in our minds. Oh, that was long back. More and more, we discover that brands don't live in our minds. They actually live in the links between one mind and the other. Brands in the social age, in today's times, live in networks. In fact, brands are networks. Brands are networks of people with shared memories, common need states, shared affinities. They are networks. And if brands are networks, what that means is that brands grow when people cue other people to join the network. And brands decline when people tell other people to leave the network. And that fundamentally changes the entire mathematics of marketing, because then you have to look at network effects and exponential curves and chain reactions. So I would love to invite the more mathematically inclined friends of mine here to look into the mathematical behavior of brands in the social age, all right? So brands live in networks, they are networks. In fact, when I think of brands today, there's this beautiful scene in the movie Avatar, if you remember. Do you remember this scene? Aiwa, the mother tree, and there's a vast organic meta-network of Navis connected and breathing life into a dead body. Brands more and more are becoming the mother trees that give us purpose, that give us self-perception, and succor gratification for our needs. And the nature of these networks today requires data, because it generates vast amounts of data that need to be mined to glean insights, that need to be married with instincts to create solutions that can be deployed in real time, because the nature of these networks is very instantaneous. If brands are networks, content is the fuel of these networks. It keeps the networks lubricated, it gives it currency, it gives it reputation, it gives it empathy, what forms the brand equity. But not all content travels. In fact, most don't. And those who travel are those who have authenticity, who are engaging, and who are relevant. Right content, when you talk about content, you can think of many types of content. And here we have 5 pipes that we talk about typically: peer-to-peer, influencer, editorial, experiential, and advertising. But you can also look at it in other ways: long form, short form, curated, crafted, co-created, data-fueled, adaptive, upper funnel, lower funnel. How you put the right kind of content at the right time via the right channels for the right bottleneck in the consumer journey is the crux of what we call content architecture. And we built Malaysia Airlines as a content brand for the social age with a well-thought-through content architecture that married, that mixed and matched all these elements in a beautiful way. And you will see how when the crisis hit, this came alive. In fact, I heard a lot of speakers talking about programmatic, which seeks to automate the demand chain. Supply chain was already automated. If you imagine a world where the supply chain and demand chain both are fully automated and married to each other in one seamless conversation, and it's already happening. I know businesses which are already doing that. At some level, you are talking about deep commodification, and what will allow brands to still command a premium, higher margins than rest of the people in the brands in the category, is the content. So content will form the premium that will separate the brands from the commodities. This equation must transform our industry, not just media agencies, but actually the entire marketing ecosystem. Connections plus content breed commerce. And here is a proof. This is Malaysia Airlines. The pink line is social engagement, the positive conversations in 2013, and the blue line is the sales. And you can see the amazing correlation between the two, how the share of conversations drive the share of market in such a close synchronicity. This is really amazing. But when you have a brand like that, that moves so closely to the rhythm of how the conversations about it move, what happens when it's hit by a huge crisis? The same instantaneous global network of people with shared need states and memories can turn upon you. How do you handle that? I'll invite Dean Dacko, the man with the best credentials in the world in terms of global crisis management, not one, but two in the last 1 year, to talk from an insider point of view as the man who was in the hot seat in Malaysia Airlines.
Thank you, Prashant. And thank you for allowing me to address you this afternoon. A word that was used quite frequently during, and certainly right after MH370, was the word unprecedented. It was completely unprecedented that a modern Boeing 777 aircraft with all the latest of technology on board could simply vanish. It still have no idea where that aircraft is, even today. It was completely unprecedented in the size and the scale of the search and rescue exercise that went on that at one time involved 26 nations and over 100 ships and aircraft. And again, that search is still going on today, completely unprecedented. It was completely unprecedented in the size and scale of the media intensity that followed the breaking of that story. It went on for literally weeks and months, and in some cases, in some parts of the world, any story that's even being published today is being republished right around the globe. But a completely unprecedented nature of the amount of intensity that that story garnered worldwide. And then lastly, completely unprecedented that within 17 weeks of having gone through the first event, we were hit again with another major global and hugely tragic event. But one thing that we knew whilst all this intensity was happening and all this activity was going on was that our first mission, our first goal, our first objective was to make sure that we were managing and taking care of the next of kin of the passengers on board that aircraft. But what they went through was something that I think none of us can really imagine, that overnight, in a single stroke, that something that's personal to their sons and daughters and families could happen in that instant. So we dedicated ourselves to making sure that those people were taken care of. Within 7 hours of the first event, we took 93 people on an aircraft down to Beijing, and we set up 2 crisis management centers within Beijing and 2 hotels. At the peak, we were managing 1,000 of the next of kin, 24 hours a day, providing them with all 4 meals a day, all the doctor's appointments, all of everything else that they had to go through. It was about $1 million a day that we spent on that exercise for over 7 weeks. But we knew that that was our job. That was something we had to do, and we dedicated ourselves to it. But at the very same time, as we were doing that, and we were managing the effects of that crisis and all of the activity that went on in terms of all the briefings of the agencies, all the investigations of all the police agencies and the FAA, the massive amount of effort that was going on, we're flying almost 400 flights a day, carrying just under 50,000 passengers a day, and that did not stop. It still keeps continuing today. So we did not lose focus on what our core objective was to make sure that we were continuing to run an airline, and we were very, very proud of the fact that we were dedicated in doing that. During the aftermath of MH370, we had a huge reaction from the social media environment. And as Prashant was saying, in this new digital age, we were already very sympathetic to how our brand was being reacted to by consumers and audiences right around the world. But after that event, it completely went into the stratosphere. And one of the things that happened just at that time, or just a few weeks before the event happened, we had actually taken all of our website infrastructure, moved it off of our own servers in Kuala Lumpur, and we put it onto the cloud so that we'd have immediate scalability and immediate opportunity to manage that infrastructure. Within 3 weeks of that event, we had 3 massive denial of service attacks on our websites, to the point where in a normal environment, we get to between 200 and 300 hits a second on our website. Each time in each one of those 3 events, we went to 230,000 hits a second. In any one of those events, our infrastructure would have completely collapsed, and we would have been black. So just by nature of having moved that infrastructure from those servers to the cloud saved us a dramatic embarrassment. It certainly kept us in business during all this whole time. So it happened 3 times. So it was massive. It was a significant reaction to the marketplace. And in reality, in that you can see that spike that occurs in about the 3rd way in. The reality of the majority of those 58 million mentions happened within the first 3 weeks. So we're managing a huge reaction. And without being able to be prepared for it, we would have ultimately had no chance of dealing with the situation. So how do we deal with it? We actually created a plan. At that point, we had 16 different country sites, and what we did is we set up an ability to monitor and engage with all those audiences globally. And we created a map, and we coded them either red, yellow, or green. And if they were green in the conversations that were going on in that marketplace, we would move forward. If it was yellow, we would move with caution. And if it was red, we would just completely stop, and then we'd move back or change the dialogue or what we were publishing at that time. And it was really that ability to really monitor and be engaged, and we got reaction to each one of those marketplaces. We got a full report within every 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes, 24 hours a day for 7 weeks, we were looking at all their engagements and all those messages that was coming to us, and we were making determinations on what we could or couldn't say. And it was something that we really put forward as a solution to manage this, and it really worked. And one of the things that we were acknowledged, so part of that whole process and how we were engaging, there was an article written in the Wall Street Journal in about August. And prior to these events, what I had done is I had set up an infrastructure so that we would have an ability to engage with our global audiences, because I knew that we needed to shift from a traditional, more legacy type of airline environment to a more digital savvy capability. And so just prior to the events happening, I had created an infrastructure, and we really partnered with IPG and Rally to allow us to have people that were on the ground in those markets, plus the support of Rally, to monitor and engage with our audiences on a global basis. The operating principle, the SOP that I put forward, was to be able to engage with 80% of our audiences within 20 minutes. What the Wall Street Journal had recorded was actually we'd achieved 76% of our audiences within 15 minutes, which was a pretty amazing result considering we had zero capability within only about 2 or 3 months ahead of that. So we were tested in an amazing way, and we actually were successful. But it wasn't just about reacting. What we had to create was a plan. So we created a plan to bring us from what we referred to as a blackout stage, where we took and eliminated every single thing that was being published about Malaysia Airlines in terms of our own creative, all of our ads, anything you would see worldwide, we took down within 2 hours of the event. But then we realized that now that we were completely blocked to the world, we needed to find a way to move forward. And into the intensity that we were in, which was like having a massive white light being shone on you by all the media all over the world, it was very, very difficult to find a way to move forward. So we had to come up with a plan and a way to do that. So in the very first stage, case of the road to recovery, we established 4 distinct components of it. There was a blackout phase, there was a closure and transition and recovery phase, and then finally a back to business as usual. Within that blackout phase, one of the things that we realized was that while we were not advertising, while we were not communicating in any of that context, what we needed to do was to get the information out, and where the public really wanted to hear from us was from our CEO. They wanted to hear what he was doing about it. What was the organization saying? What was the organization doing about this massive and tragic event that there was absolutely no information on? No one knew where the plane was, what was happening. They wanted to hear from the CEO. So we created content and leveraging what he would say personally and from his own perspective. And that was very powerful. Then we moved to a closure and transition phase, and we talked about more of what we were doing, and we tried to move past the event itself and into more of an environment where we were really just explaining what we were doing, but trying to bring closure to that component of the event itself. And then as we moved forward, we wanted to start to introduce more commercial messaging. So what we did is we leveraged those individual country sites, and we created content that we would then test. So we would publish something in one market, and then we would A/B test it to see what was being reacted to, and then we would do that in each individual country site going forward. So each time we would get a reaction. If the reaction was a positive one, we would deploy it in another market. And we went through that on virtually, again, every 20 minutes we'd get a report based on what we were hearing, what we were saying, and then we would move. And that was how we managed to get re-engaged in the commercial context. And it took ultimately 7 weeks before we returned to anything like a business as usual. And in the first phase of this, it was completely digital. We did not move to more of a traditional context, because what really provided this was by splitting off the world in those 16 different regions, we were able to be highly targeted in what we were saying. We were very specific in what we were engaging with those audiences and what we were saying, and that digital capability allowed us to do that. We were very flexible, so that if we saw anything challenging what we were saying, or we got negative feedback, we immediately shut it down and we would change the story entirely. So it allowed us to be very flexible, virtually within minutes. And then finally, and this is all part of the whole notion of the current environment that we're in, where it's very, very personal, and you need to have a relationship with those individual customers. That whole notion of personalization is the reality of what we're now dealing with in that social media environment. So as we started to build and get re-engaged as a brand and had people more supporting us, talking about us, it translated into an increase in our sales. So when the first event happened, we took down all of our media assets worldwide. We saw a loss of booking velocity, including the cancellations of our existing bookings, to the point where we were taking about 100,000 cancellations a day for the first 10 days. which is dramatic, and our booking velocity completely shut off. So within 7 weeks, we managed to recover that, and all of our strategies, what we did in the social media environment, actually responded in a commercial way, so that by May of that spring, within basically, 7, 8 weeks of the event, we were now back into a business as usual environment, communicating and promoting ourselves to the point where May was the second largest booking month in the history of the airline on our direct website. We thought for sure we now had recovered. We had basically looked at our financial situation. We thought that we could have recovered $1.6 billion in revenue by nature of what we had done. So we thought we were well on our way. Then again, within 17 weeks, we were hit with another massive and tragic event. But this time, having gone through it the first time, whilst we were absolutely shocked and devastated by the fact that we could absolutely be in the same place again, that was, it was surreal in terms of the feeling that the entire organization felt. But what it allowed us to do was to be more assertive and direct in our ability to move forward. What we did in 7 weeks, we now did in 5 days. And we were able to be more assertive, we were able to be more direct, and we actually recovered in a much more quicker and aggressive way. But what we decided to do and what we realized is all the learning that we had got from leveraging the social media environment, all that feedback we got from literally tens of millions of people worldwide, recognized that it wasn't about a tactical message for us. It was about leveraging the relationship we had and the size and the scale of the audience we now had following us to create a social media strategy that we really used as a replacement for a branding strategy. So we devised a way to publish a number of different stories that were really meant as content to engage with our audiences worldwide and to tell them more about what we were doing. But ultimately, it was really recognized as a purely social media strategy. The first one, and our first initiative on this, was really intended as an internal message. So after MH17 happened, as I mentioned, it was completely devastating. Every single 20,000 employees that we have in Malaysia, every single one of them felt that they had just gotten a massive body blow to the stomach. The wind was taken out of us. We just couldn't absolutely believe that after having gone through something as devastating as MH370, that we could be hit again. How could that possibly happen? So what we did is we published an internal message to our staff, and we said, stay strong. Stay strong, folks. We need to keep going. And that message, when we published it on the other social media streams, went viral. So literally tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people then reposted that back and communicated that back to us saying, yes, Malaysia, stay strong. Still continue to move forward. So it went from an internal message to a massive external message. So then, as you know, in order to move the story forward, you have to be very appropriate in terms of publishing and refreshing your content. So we started to devise a way to continue to publish messages and keep the story going, keep our audiences engaged, and to make sure that they understood that we were moving forward with various different messages around staying strong, flying high, keep flying. These were the messages that we were publishing to our audiences. So I'm going to pass over to Prashant to talk about the details, and then we're going to end with a video that we engaged with a singer-songwriter by the name of Yuna, who lives in Malaysia, but she's actually has residence in Los Angeles. But she's a massively recognized singer-songwriter in Malaysia, and she agreed to publish a song, record a song, and it's on her latest album, and it really says a lot about keeping strong with Malaysia Airlines.
All right, so what do we take out of this? And how could brands be better prepared just in case this nightmare ever hit one of you? I mean, I'm sure none of you ever want to be in the dean's shoes and seen through what he has seen through. So just to very quickly summarize, the most important thing to remember is that when we talk about social and social media, the only social medium is the human being. All the rest is technology. So it pays to be authentic. Whenever in doubt, how do we keep going back to being human, being real, being authentic, and doing your best? And Dean talked about that quite a lot. Number 2, you need a ready, real-time global social media machine. If you are a global brand, if a crisis like this hits you, you cannot afterwards go and create an infrastructure. You need to have social media team across the world in the outports where it matters to you. And you need to have it ready to respond in real time when things go wrong. Just look at the vital stats. 58 million conversations monitored across 26 countries in 14 languages, 18 time zones. Average response time was 9.4 minutes. Dean talked about 76% of the response within 15 minutes. And 4,000 different pieces of content, right from the Facebook messages to the tweets to the TVCs to the webisodes to the music videos and stuff that we came up with was produced. For those 7 weeks that Dean referred to, our teams and the corresponding Malaysia Airlines team were working 24/7 in 3 shifts. And that, I mean, agencies are known for working hard, but that is the kind of effort that even surprised me, for instance. But it was amazing, the spirit. Number 2, and I have spoken about this, leverage the full spectrum of content through the right channels. What one type of content can do, the other type of content cannot do as effectively. And fortunately, in the age we live in, we have a choice to use different types of content at the right time, in the right moments, to address the right needs. So here is what we did in Malaysia Airlines, a very quick one. I mean, of course, there's a lot of stuff behind that. So if you look at the 5 types of content, peer-to-peer, influencer, editorial, advertising, and experiential, and on the other side, we have the 4 phases. It started with a lot of PR and the black on the website and the Facebook page and everywhere, and the CEO speaking about, from his point of view, how he felt bad about the whole tragedy and what he was trying to do. Search to steer people in the right places, and of course, social media reactions to those 58 million conversations that were going on. The second phase, we then brought out, of course, Dean talked about how we lifted the spirits. That is where we brought the national icon, Yuna, the famous singer, to compose a music video just for the purpose. The newspaper supplements that actually printed people's messages, empathizing with each other and with the airlines in this phase, building atmosphere of positivity and gathering people around the airline together in this journey. And finally, as we moved to the keep flying territory, we had a youth icon, Lily, who came up with an even more upbeat song. And then when we wanted to drive transactions, and we felt that it was a safe time to drive transactions, we used programmatic, using our data management platform, programmatic targeting to identify different types of affinity groups, different types of reasons for which people come to Malaysia Airlines, created custom content to target them, and the series of destination webisodes were launched, an on-ground activation was launched, plus a massive remarketing campaign was launched, which finally helped us get back our sales where it had been before the crisis. So let me close the whole session with this beautiful song before we jump into the Q&A, which was sung by Yuda, a very quick glimpse to capture the mood of that phase. Video, please.
See the sky, the birds are flying, clouds are moving by, my heart is light, the moon will be my witness tonight. my dreams, I see myself fly. Terbang, terbang tinggi walau tanah di.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We still have some time.
Yes,
so
we do indeed. Thank you very much, guys. It's a fantastic presentation, very kind of touching, emotive, and insightful presentation as to how a brand reacts. I'm sure we have some questions. In fact, we have one here already. I didn't even get a chance to ask one. Outrageous.
Please.
Thank you for that. It's an extraordinary story, and I think you deserve everybody's respect here for what you've been through. I just can't imagine how you dealt with it.
Thank you.
You used the word unprecedented at the beginning, which is obviously very understandable, but I just wanted to ask you, were there any other case studies from history that you looked at for influence in dealing with this, or were you literally kind of making it up as you went along?
Yeah, I think, let me start this way. When the event like this, where there's a loss of life, is the worst possible thing that can happen for an airline. So we establish a way to manage these events, and we set up mock exercises, and we practice them every quarter. So every quarter we'd all get together and we'd have some sort of mock event that would happen, and we'd go through everything that we would do, and we do that every quarter. When this event happened, it was so blinding, it was so large, it was so intense that we were never prepared for that. No matter how much we'd worked at it and how much we'd practiced, it still was way beyond what we had imagined. So one of the first things we did is we reached out to find some support, someone who could help us. What do we need to do immediately? What are the things we need to manage and try to understand how we move forward from this? And we talked, immediately reached out to other airlines. We looked at crisis management companies. We actually hired a company out of Singapore who came in within hours of the event. The reality was that what we were going through and the sheer notion of the mystery that was created by the fact that that plane just completely vanished, and no one knew whether or not there was another event, whether there was another conspiracy, whether there was another group of people who were going to do this to other airlines or whatever else, that there was nothing that we could grab onto. The manual that we created to follow, we literally threw it out. And we created everything we did to manage that event after, basically by ourselves, trying to figure out how the best way to move it forward. So the reality is there wasn't anything that we could look to. Anything that any airline had gone through before that had really started with the notion of what they knew what happened. You knew that there was an airplane crash. You could basically find the records, you find the after fact. You could really figure it out from there and you would move it forward. Most crashes of this nature really are solved within the first 10 days. Ours is still going on well over a year.
I mean, absolutely. Just to give you a picture from our side, Rally, which is IPG's social media division, we do have what we call normative sciences division, which compiles a lot of data about viral campaigns and crisis, different types of crisis that we face on different brands that we handle, to sort of plot things like reflex velocity. If in the first 24 hours, this is the level of conversation, where will it go in the next 3 days, and so on and so forth. But this was such an exceptional phenomenon that none of those norms, it totally defied all those norms in the very first 3 hours when the news broke out. So frankly, all science failed. And we had to go back to that slide I showed you, which is the only social media, the only true social media is the human being. You have to go back to your human instincts and say what is the right way to do. And that slide that Dean showed, which is we put ourselves in their shoes and we try to feel how they feel, and then we react in the best way the business should react. Sorry, there's a raised hand there.
We've got one at the back first as well, I think.
Thank you again for being so candid with this presentation. I think it's been very revealing. You would know better than most that the internet never forgets, and just now even Googling Malaysia Airlines surfaces suggestive search around Flight 370, new news stories that come up with hijacking theories and all of those sorts of things. Could you speak a little about your approach to reputation management and suppressing or controlling or reacting to the search result pages?
Well, you're absolutely right in that the sheer nature of the fact that there's really no information causes a lot of people to speculate on a whole bunch of different things. And I can tell you that there's several reporters in various different parts of the world that have made their careers based on just publishing stories about MH370 and MH17. That anything they say ultimately gets published and republished on mainstream media worldwide. The notion of what we tried to do was to manage how to react to all those stories being published. So we needed to engage with them. One of the things that I'll elaborate a little bit on is that what happens in this digital space is you have a source of some sort of a question that comes up. It can be from anywhere in the world, it could be from anyone in the world, it could be a reporter, it could be any individual. And what happens is that it gets published out there. And with MH370, MH17 and Malaysia Airlines, it seems to get a large reaction. In that context, what happens if we don't answer it, the issue gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, you have all sorts of millions of people responding to something and expecting that there's going to be an answer to it. And if there's no answer from us, it just keeps getting and escalating. As soon as we answer it, it moves, it goes away. So we realized that we had to be responsive, we had to be engaged. And then the other part that we needed to make sure that we were doing was not just reacting to all these theories, but really putting forward our brand strategy, talking about what was so keen and important to us as an airline, reminding people why we were as good as we are. Still a 5-star airline, still carrying 50,000 passengers a day, and still being one of the safest airlines in the world. Our safety record prior to these two events was one of the best in the world. So we needed to continue to tell our story. So we had a combination of both those things happening.
I mean, what happened is real, and it's a part of our history, and we have internalized it, and it's real. As far as the long tail future is concerned, there's a beautiful story where somebody asked someone to cut short a red line without erasing it. And the clever guy, he drew a long green line in front of it, and the red line became short. So I believe we need stories. We need happy stories coming out of Malaysia Airlines that overwhelm the long tail of MS370 and MH17 that has happened. That's the best we can hope for.
And I think we have one final question there, do we? There we go. Ah. No, that one was answered in that question. Any more questions for the two guys before they depart? They might not be around for long afterwards, so this is your final chance of the day. Okay.
Perfect.
Big round of applause for Dean and Prashant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.